All right, and you can take it away.
It sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Christina Hilburger. I am a Research and Information Literacy Services librarian at Reed Library at SUNY Fredonia. And I'm joined by my colleague, Dawn Eckenrode, who's the director of the Professional Development Center here at Fredonia. So today we're excited to share with you some of the findings from our comparative analysis of student perceptions around textbook affordability and resource preferences. And we're focusing on trends that we've observed from 2019 to 2024. And we'll be exploring how our efforts to encourage adoption of OER have impacted students here at Fredonia. And we hope to provide some valuable insights into what's been working and where we can continue to improve. But before we kind of jump into the rest of the presentation, I wanted to give a little shout out to our graduate assistants who helped sort of develop the survey for this comparative analysis. So in 2019, my colleague, Caitlin Telford, who is actually now a tenure track librarian here at Reed, and a fantastic colleague, played an essential role in getting that started. And then this year we have our graduate assistant, Amber Ambrose, who's currently pursuing her path toward becoming a school librarian. And she's at University of Buffalo right now. So I wanted to thank them for their contributions.
And we figured to get started with our presentation today, we'd give you a little bit of background information on Fredonia's OER and textbook affordability efforts here on campus. It really stemmed from our work that launched in 2017 when SUNY received funding, that $4 million to promote OER on campuses as part of the Excelsior program. So we really got invested in this conversation on our campus around that time. And since then, we've had hundreds of OER course sections taught. And the way that we've been utilizing our funding is by providing our faculty with OER adoption incentives. And we found that program to be very successful. We provide small stipends to our faculty to redesign their courses as OER or low cost, no cost courses. And through the years, we provided many different professional development opportunities for our faculty. And we have a great partnership with the library. The faculty love getting library support in finding OER materials for their courses. So that's really where our initial efforts stem from. We can do the next slide. And then just to give you a little context about how our program has developed over time. In 2018 and 2019, we had 26 original courses that were being taught using OER materials and 134 course sections. And we were reaching a little over 3,000 students at that time. And I think this is really interesting compared to now. The number of unique courses that are being taught has increased. The number of sections has remained pretty similar. And what I also think is an interesting data trend is that the number of students impacted has stayed relatively flat as well. And we're trying to think about some of the causes of that. I think it really follows with our current enrollment trends. Our enrollments are down. So I think our course, the number of students enrolled in our different course sections is smaller. Also, in looking at our data, it looks like 17 of the courses that were being offered in 2018, 2019 are no longer being taught OER due to faculty attrition. And many of those courses were some of our higher enrollment freshman lecture, large lecture classes. So I think that that's why we've really seen the number of students that we're impacting remaining flat while the number of courses have increased. And now just to give you a little bit of background on our textbook affordability student perception survey. For this project, we wanted to conduct a comparative analysis of our data from 2019 to 2024. And we really wanted to understand how our students' perception around textbook affordability and their preferences have evolved over time. particularly in the light of the work we've been doing with OER. And we focus on a few key areas. We are looking at students' awareness of OER, how much students are spending on their textbooks, their preferences for formats, whether they're leaning towards digital or physical materials, and behavior trends, such as how textbook costs influence students' course choices. And just to give you a little bit of information about our process, we went through IRB approval before distributing our survey to our students. And our participant pool, since we really wanted to look at the impact of OER, we sent the survey just to students who were enrolled in at least one OER designated course in the year the survey was being administered. And to incentivize the students to complete the survey, we provided $10 gift cards in a drawing at the end of the survey once it was complete. And we just used Google Forms and had students access the survey through their email. And we had a mix of closed and open-ended questions so that we could collect both quantitative and qualitative data. And we'll share a copy of our survey questions at the end in case anyone is interested in looking at those. And you can see our response rates. We had about 100 fewer students in 2024. I'm thinking that's due to when we released the survey to the students. I think we were closer to finals week, so I think that resulted in a lower response rate. And then just a little bit of data about our student respondents and what they reported to us. 45% in 2019 said that they were Pell eligible at the time. 30% were aware that they're Pell eligible in the 2024 survey. Around the same amount identified as being Excelsior recipients, and then you can see 16 and 22% identified as first-generation students. And then to give you some information about what the information that we collected with students' familiarity with OER on campus, it was interesting. We saw no changes in the data trends between 2019 and 2024. In both of the years, 37% of the respondents said they had some level of familiarity with OER, and 12% were aware that they were enrolled in an OER course. So even though the entire survey sample was from students enrolled in OER courses, only 12% were aware of that. So I think that that is showing that we probably, if we want students to be aware that they're enrolled in these types of courses, we really need to do more outreach to our faculty to raise that awareness in their courses. Because one thing the students also said in the survey data is that the way that they'd like to receive information about OER initiatives is through their faculty. And again, the data stayed identical with students reporting if they felt that they had saved money from being enrolled in OER courses. 25 to 30% reported that they felt that they had saved money, and 63% really just didn't know because I just don't think they had that familiarity.
Okay, so I want to take a little closer look at some of our initial findings. So there was definitely a shift to digital materials in terms of preference. So in 2019, we were around 61% of students who preferred physical printed material. And then in 2024, that dropped down to 47.4%. And a lot of the students were choosing websites, PDFs, and things like that as their preferred format. In terms of affordability, the percentage of students unable to afford materials had decreased. So we were around 43.7% in 2019, and that dropped down to 25% in 2024. Related to that, if we look at the textbook spending, students are spending a significant less amount on textbooks. So in 2019, only 3.4 students were spending or indicating that they were spending less than $50 per semester. And then in 2024, over 25, almost 26% of students indicated that they were spending less than that. So that's a pretty significant improvement in terms of affordability. And then increase in purchasing their texts for their courses, their course materials. So in 2019, just over 30% always bought materials. So that's a good number of students who indicated that they weren't necessarily buying all of their materials. And that actually bumped up to 53.4% of students always purchasing materials. And that could be due to the lower cost of the assigned materials. So they're able to afford those. And then when it comes to students' perceptions of fair pricing, we've seen a shift between 2019 and 2024. So in 2019, a little over 61% of students considered a price under $50 to be fair. And then by 2024, that percentage increased to 75.9%. So what there's sort of perceiving as a fair number has changed quite significantly. And then we also wanted to share a couple of quotes from the students that sort of reflect some of the ongoing challenges that they face. So 2019, a student said, I literally spend thousands for classes that need me to pay $200 for a book we use twice a semester. And then on a similar vein, in 2024, I'm from a low-income area. Paying for college is already a huge struggle. Having to spend hundreds of extra dollars on textbooks is very difficult to do to consistently do. So we had a handful of other similar responses. So that still remains an issue. And then one thing that was kind of interesting, though, is there's still a persistent challenge in terms of the number of students dropping courses because of textbook costs. So in both surveys, it was just over 18% of students reporting dropping a course due to the cost of required materials. So affordability has improved some, but students are still dropping some of their courses. So we thought that was interesting that the number remained the same. And then a few key takeaways. So our findings do show that while digital access is growing, there's still challenges. Many students are adapting to the digital materials, but issues like digital accessibility and reliable access to materials from day one of class still pose barriers to their success. And in addition to that, their preferences are still evolving. But it's also important to recognize that not all students necessarily have the same access to the forms of technology needed for some of the digital material. So I think that's important to keep in mind when we're thinking about accessibility barriers. And that might also include traditional textbooks that have been shifted to a digital format with maybe a paid subscription to access tests and supplemental materials for the course. So we've been seeing issues with accessibility there, and that could be partly due to the shift to Brightspace, or possibly recently we have an agreement with a third party for operating our bookstore materials, and there's been some challenges there. Looking ahead, there's several areas that we'd like to focus on. So one of our primary goals is to continue improving affordability, of course, for students, especially for high-cost courses where textbook prices remain a challenge. But we also plan to take a look and do some outreach with faculty regarding DFW rates. So courses where students tend to drop, fail, or withdraw. And we do believe that textbook affordability probably plays a role in this. We've had some interesting anecdotes shared with us. A faculty member reached out to us from the accounting department and mentioned that they had a course that historically had high DFW rates, and this was just last semester. The faculty member believe that this was likely due to the cost of the textbook. And then after adopting OER materials, their DFW rate actually decreased by over 16%. And that's the lowest level that they've had in DFW rates in over 4 semesters. And they mentioned that there was no other changes made to the course in terms of content or grading or anything like that. The only change was the OER materials. So we'd like to take a closer look at DFW rates, because that's not something we've done super in-depth research on. So another possible area of assessment that we can look at. And we'd also like to encourage faculty to report data on their course materials and student performance, so we can track the impact of affordability initiatives like OER. This will help us make some more informed decisions on our efforts and where they're needed most. Another important area that we want to explore is expanding affordability opportunities beyond just OER. So recently, my role as a librarian, I've really been advocating for access to the faculty assigned course materials list through that third-party bookstore that I mentioned. This, which I was able to get, and this has allowed us to populate a more substantial list of course materials that we already have available through the library, and do kind of a matching and populating our course reserves lists to get that set up so that students can easily access their materials through the library. So that's something we're still working on. But yeah, so affordability, it's definitely a significant benefit of OER, but it's definitely not the only one. We're also hoping to explore other applications of open education. So OER is saving money, but it can also help transform teaching and learning in innovative ways. So this could be open pedagogy, which some of our sessions have talked about, and other applications of open education. So we'd like to do a little more assessment in assessing student engagement and other educational outcomes, but especially those DFW rates. And then if anyone is interested, this is a QR code to the student survey questions that we used for both the 2019 survey and the 2024 survey. So we're still working on analyzing the data collected from the 2 surveys, but that's kind of an initial glance at what we found, and some interesting things that we'd like to pursue a little more closely. And yeah, thank you again for your time and attention today. If there's anything you'd like to discuss, if you have any questions for Dawn and I, you're more than welcome to unmute yourself. And if you think of something later, we'd be happy to continue the conversation. You can always reach out to us via email. So thank you. Any questions?
I'm not seeing anything come into the chat. Think, yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.